Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Kerbal Space Program series we're calling KSP POV, where we play Kerbal Space Program in first person. Today is going to be a bit of a different episode, as you can see from the thumbnail and the title. We are going to be doing planes. It is the Kerbal Aerospace Program today. Um, and because of that, we are going to be doing a lot of trials, a lot of tests, a lot of simulations, and I'm not very good with planes. I'm not good at designing planes. I'm not good at flying planes. And the fact that we're doing this in first person is going to add a particular extra challenge to things. Um, so I could have just done this off camera, done a lot of this stuff off camera, and just shown you the successful flight, and been like, yeah, there we go, we did our mission. Um, isn't that great? It only, took all these hours that you didn't get to see behind the camera. So rather than doing that, I decided to just let the footage roll, and what you're gonna see here is all the different attempts, in order. Obviously, just kind of sped up all the different attempts that it took for me to get the mission completed. As you see, that was a simulator. We're going to be making use of the mod Crash to simulate a lot of these flights to make sure that we don't kill Kerbals unintentionally. So throwing on a parachute on that because I don't trust myself to land very well. And if we have to, we can just kill our velocity as best we can and pop a parachute and just come straight down. So this is just the early test plane, just to kind of refresh myself on the concept. I'm not completely new with planes. I have made planes before, never ones that really land very well, and always ones that have issues upon takeoff. So uh, it's been a while, so it's kind of a refresher course. That marker right over there is our ultimate plan, our ultimate mission. We don't have a contract for it or anything, but the the Kerbinauts have heard whispers of a new launch pad that can be found out that way, and they've convinced the administration people to allow them to explore it. So here we got Tedrod. He's going to be our ace pilot. Uh, he's going to be the one flying the missions. Dilpond has 2 stars, but is too valuable as an astronaut to lose playing around with planes that he's not equipped to deal with. So yeah, so we are not in a simulation now. We are live, and Todd Rod is taking command of this plane. He's only done a few simulations of it before, so he somewhat knows what everything does, but certainly doesn't know how to control it. And instantly on his first launch, it goes to failure, almost catastrophic failure. Not in control of anything. All he can do is just kind of wait and hope. But luckily, the capsules stayed together, didn't break apart. So what we decided to do is we decided to create a private corporation to do our test flights for us. They are going to design our planes and make it work for us, so we don't lose any of our Kerbal knots in the process. So this is the proving grounds. And here we are going to be practicing for myself. I realized that I needed more practice flying planes um, before I just suddenly just started doing it in my career mode. Uh, the Kerbals can only be blamed so much. The rest of it's kind of on me. So here we are again, flipping over. Um, but since this is kind of like a pocket dimension Kerbal Space program, uh, we're going to be doing reverts instead of simulations. This is in um, sandbox mode, so of course everything is upgraded fully. and simulations don't cost any money, so there's really no difference between doing them in that and regular mode. So here I am, getting my plane up and out, and I'm like, all right, so that makes sense. Let's try it again, but we're gonna do IVA mode, because if you see me doing it in EVA mode, third person, it's just because I'm trying to figure out if the plane itself works. And then when I am in IVA mode, that is me trying to control the plane, how I will be doing um, in our regular save. Once again, we have a bit of a speed wobble and we tear apart. So, but that was me not paying attention to where I was going. I was looking at that screen too much. And so I just decided to try again, just revert it. There's going to be a lot of reverts. If that's not your thing, if planes aren't your thing, if you're prone to motion sickness, I would recommend skipping this episode. Because that's all we do is planes. We have a lot of struggles, and so we're going to be reverting a lot and just kind of doing that. And eventually, once we do start getting the hang of planes, we're going to be banking and turning and rolling. That might not be the most pleasant to watch. Now, I know some of you are probably screaming right now and saying, like, why are you putting wheels on the wings? That's terrible. That's a terrible idea. And I hear ya. I get ya. I do figure that out. My thought was extra stability, but as anybody would know, it leads more often to this. So I'm here scratching my head because this is a relatively simple design. So I'm thinking, like, I've seen a plane like this. I think I've made planes like this that worked, and I'm just wondering why it's not working. So we're just doing another test, and I'm just, I was feeling pretty happy about that. It was straight for a while, but then it just banked off the side of the runway for no reason, or for seemingly no reason. Sure, there was a reason. So what I'm doing here, what I've been doing with this is I start with the brake on, and start up the engine, get it running. Ooh, fighting. But I start up the engine with the brakes on, and let it fight against that power a little bit until the engines are at their max speed, because they take a second to get up to power. Oof, too heavy on the back end. That's not going to be a good design. Just telling myself in the past, should have listened to me in the future, and then you wouldn't have had this struggle with the engines. And here we are doing another test. This time with a beefier engine. I mean, the last time I had a beefier engine as well, but I forgot to mention the fact that we used tweak scale to lift up the engine a little bit. I'm not sure how I felt about that, whether or not that was cheating or not, but I forgot to resize it by the end of the final design. So here I am adding a little bit more length to maybe stabilize things. I go ahead and put those side engines back on the wings, which honestly I should have just kept them in the back. I was doing pretty good. I just didn't recognize that I was doing good with the engines in the back. But of course, having all the thrust coming from the same side or the same place was a better design. So I'm starting to trick myself into believing that the wheels on the side were on the side of the engines were good, and having them that far forward was okay. So I go ahead and just keep going with what I'm doing. And of course, if you're familiar with plane design and you know where my fault is, feel free to let me know. And anywhere, any advice on plane flying, I can always take. But I know with this one, uh, the fault. Well, we'll get there later, but the fault was in that heavy back end that we saw at the beginning. But because I didn't have any problem with that, I viewed this as a successful takeoff. I was pretty happy with that. Feeling like we're finally rounded in on a good design. And I had extended the length of the plane here, so I'm like, oh well, that's all I needed to do. That's so obvious. So here I am testing the capabilities of its turning, and I decided I wanted to make an impromptu either flyby or landing of the island runway. Um, and then I keep seeing this overspeed warning, and you'll see at some points I lower my thrust, or my throttle, I should say, seemingly for no reason. Oh yeah, here I accidentally staged the parachute, so I just went ahead, rolled with it, killed the engine, did a nice little flip, and then plunged straight into the water. Sure, that's a very comforting feeling for a pilot, seeing that view. But that's the benefit of running these tests through an external corporation. So we go ahead and take that plane and go back to our normal save, the Atomic Celestial Exploration Program, the ACE, if you will. And here we're trying to get our ACE pilots get some experience. And as I mentioned before, Tedrod Kermin is going to be our pilot, our aerospace pilot. We have two pilots, and using the Final Frontier mod, or it might be the Earn Your Stripes mod, one of those two. We started off our program with randomized Kerbal, so no Jeb, no Val, no Bill, no Bob. But we have other Kerbals instead. Dilpon, Lagobert, all the stars of the previous episodes. So Tedrod was a little perturbed that he spent all that time training, and the product that the corporation sent was faulty. But he managed to maintain it and not break it apart as it exited the runway. So here at the here at ACE, we decided to work on the design ourselves a little bit. Take what they had started for us and try to improve upon it. Part of which being they didn't understand why it needed to be so long. They probably were concerned that by blocking the door, the Kerbal wouldn't be able to get out until they were rescued and cut out of the craft, but our agency didn't really care about that. That's perfectly acceptable. So, in the time that it took for the alternate corporation to test out this plane, our scientists realized that having the wheels on the wings only led to instability, and it would be much better off not only on the fuselage but back a little bit to keep that tail end from banging into the ground. So back again in a simulation, we test whether or not taxiing off the runway and trying to take off from this flatland was feasible, but didn't seem like it. The control of the plane didn't seem like it would allow for that, so we abandoned that idea and just take the bumpy runway as it is. I'm trying to figure out how to zoom in on this map. If anybody knows, I'm using the JSI raster prop monitors in ScanSense. And if anybody knows how to zoom in on that, I would appreciate it. I know how to do it in the other things. Oh, our engine smacked the runway. We lifted up a little too much and broke our engine. So once again, we're going back into the proving grounds to work on the design a little bit. You know, the folks at the KSC can only do so much simulation. Every time we would do a simulation, it would cost us quite a bit, actually. So in order to prevent from bankrupting the company, we're just going to pay a one-time fee to this corporation to test. And because their design was faulty, they sent back, we get to send it back to them, and they'll work on it again. So here we're going for a bit of a wider structure in the back that will hopefully allow us to keep our wheels far enough back that our engine doesn't hit, but also wide enough that we don't have wobbles on the runway. And we go ahead and name this the Sparrow Mach 1. And it doesn't take long before the pilot realizes that the elevatron, the flaps on the wing were missing. And so therefore we weren't going to be able to take off. So we go ahead and add those. And then we also go ahead and change the controls around so that way each one of the wings control a separate direction, the roll, the pitch, and the yaw. We do end up messing up the roll. I think we in this first one you see that we're unable to lift off the ground because two of those surfaces are taking care of the same thing. So one of the directions of travel is not available, and I think it's the one that lifts us up. And I get a little bit of that wobble as I'm trying to go. And so I realized I hadn't quite set those correctly, so we go back and fix it. And then there we go. We also throw on the parachute that we had forgotten. And adjusted the camera just a little bit because it was clipping out. But we have high hopes for this design. Not really much more to say. Right now we're kind of rounding in on figuring out what works. I realized that those wheels were a little bit too far back and that speed wobble was less than thrilling. So I go ahead and get rid of those side tanks and just go once again back 4 wheels on the fuselage, but a little bit forward than they were before. And then I also have the front wheel more. And I go ahead and take the steering off those wheels. So now it's only the front wheel that has steering. And then of course I forget to have any kind of air intake on the plane. So it doesn't go anywhere when I launch the stage. And so I go ahead and put on those side tanks. But I didn't pay attention, and they are not straight. They're angled a little bit. And that I didn't realize at the time, but that was exactly why I was straying off the side of the runway. So when I go and replace them, I place them back on the back of the jet, and they straighten out because they are snapping. So that problem was taken care of. But the wheels are now a situation because those are slightly angled. So I also increased some of the friction on that as well to hopefully... At this point, I'm not even sure why. I'm just trying things, throwing it against the wall, see what sticks. And already I'm having problems. I'm getting frustrated with this. And this wasn't a long episode to record, but it just felt like it because I was doing test after test. So it was just constantly moving. So I was getting frustrated after It's not that I was getting frustrated after every test, but it's just after doing so many tests, it started to get a little bit frustrating. I'm like, what am I missing? How did I do this before? Why did it work before, and why isn't it working now? And so this was a very good feeling to see it lift off, to not speed wobble too much to the point where it breaks apart. We're not stalling out. So I go ahead and revert, and now we're going to try it in first person mode, because that is the whole point, is to make sure that we can fly in the mode of our series. Because knowing how to fly in third person is great, but if I have a series called KSP POV, that's not going to help us. So yeah, so we go ahead and lift off. There's a little bit of bump, and it was right there. I kept seeing overspeed, so I dropped my throttle a little bit, but I don't think I needed to. I think this plane could have handled it quite well. There I'm playing around with the knob, seeing what works up there. The mode, I realize, is for engines that can convert between breathing oxygen and just using liquid fuel and oxidizer for different kind of space planes. So we don't have that, so it's not going to do anything. But if we were, that would have changed our type of engine. So once again, I'm pointing myself towards the island airfield with the idea that I could possibly try to land on it. Again, I am not very familiar with flying planes, and landing is going to be a lot harder than just what I would think it would be. I've only successfully landed a couple times, and usually those are on very flat areas. I do a lot better with the technique of flying above where you need to go, killing the throttle, and hitting a parachute, landing flat down vertically. Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to know how high up above the water you are right now. It's just such a different experience. So I'm trying to come down low and approach it correctly, but I am not lined up in the slightest. I wasn't going fast enough, so I was starting to lose a lot of altitude. And it's starting to become all bad. But of course, this isn't our space agency. This is the tester space agency, and so we're not going to have to do any memorial services. They can do their own memorial services. And without braking, surprisingly, I'm crashing down into the water, and still have quite a bit of momentum. So the pilot kicks on the throttle again, and pretty much recovers. So that was a pretty good test. The fact that as long as you're not going too fast, you could potentially pull off a water landing and potentially a water ascent. Who knows? So the company is very happy, and they throw this design back to the ACE program and say, hey, fly this. Why don't you test this out? So they're like, all right, we'll test it out, but we're going to do a simulation first. Tedrod has been fooled before and is not going to just jump into a plane that the proving grounds have sent them without testing it. So he goes ahead and lifts off. He doesn't like how wobbly it got towards the end, but he was appreciative that he was able to lift off. Still can't figure out the map though. These buttons leave a little bit to be desired in this particular cockpit. We're just lifting off, and it's then he decides, instead of the island runway, He's going to point towards the mission objective. He's going to start flying that way. Paying attention to his thrust to weight ratio. He sees the marker out the left window, place that the everyone who's been interested in getting this mission together, that pitched it to the higher ups, and they surprisingly were okay with it. They're like, you know what, if you want to chase down this wild goose, and if you think there's worth out of it, we trust you. You know, their reputation had taken such a dive in the previous episode after having to get a government bailout and everything, that they thought, you know, if by chance this mythical extra launch pad did exist, it would bring some clout to the agency. People would be interested again in spaceflight and potentially bring more scientists and engineers and pilots to the program. And so as we're approaching it, I decide to lower our altitude a little bit and try to get real close to get actual eyes on it instead of just instruments. We're coming in an angle, so we're going to go ahead and adjust ourselves. And then that's when we realized it was all a dream. It was a simulation. Tedrod had gotten so into it that he had forgotten that he was just in a fake capsule. So we go ahead and suit him up in his flight suit and then send him on his way, because that was a successful simulation. We trust his piloting, and he says he's ready, so we are going to let him fly for real. He plays around with the map one more time. He's just trying to zoom in. He just wants to see a little bit closer, but none of these buttons seem to do that. So if anyone knows how to, I would love to know. Let me know in the comments. So he just gets his visual map back and gives up on it. Throttles up, and they are out of there. He waves goodbye to the people at the KSC. Takes flight. Not the best flight, not the best takeoff, but anything you can walk away from or fly away from is well done. Goes ahead and lowers the landing gear. One of the benefits of not dealing with planes until a little bit later is you don't have to deal with some of the early plane technology, like landing gear that doesn't retract. So with his simulation fresh in his mind, he goes ahead and just head straight for his target. There's probably better ways of turning. This is just kind of the way that I've been able to manage. And I am definitely looking forward to getting back to rockets. Spaceflight is a lot more enjoyable for me. This was very stressful. You can't speed up time this way. Time warping while in a plane or a rover leads to disaster. Go ahead and accidentally hit the wrong button. Switch out of my seat, look out the window for a second, which is like, no, we need to be flying. And I turn on the little camera at the bottom of the plane to hopefully not just get my own eyes on it, but all the eyes of everybody watching back at Mission Control. They're getting up-to-date image data of this new place. Werner von Kermin is waiting to see, but everyone else is getting real excited, real hopeful. The cheers are there. The champagne is poured. Tedrod starts to smile and reports that he sees something on the shores. He's gonna fly by, and sure enough, there it is, the mythical launchpad of the Pirate Cove. Everyone back at Mission Control starts cheering, but Tedrod is having a bit of difficulty with his landing gear. He turned on the brakes, but not the gear. And as always, our surviving Kerbonauts honor the fallen, and they decide to plant a memorial at this new launch pad in his name. Rest in peace, Tedrod Kermin. And with that, we are going to end this episode. The Kerbal Aerospace program will be taking a break for a while until we start getting to space planes. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give me a like, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.